Hero RB draft strategy is the best, most consistent fantasy football championship winning strategy. And in 2024, it's absolutely no different, especially if you land the first overall pick in your fantasy league. With the first pick, you can leverage the best player in all of fantasy, CMC Christian McCaffrey. In this video, I go step by step, walking through the Hero RB strategy to build a championship quality squad centered around Christian McCaffrey. If that sounds good, don't forget to spike the like button and subscribe for more OwnersBox fantasy just like this. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions about the Hero RB build in this video. Let's mock draft. We're ready to draft. And with the first pick, of course, we're going to pick CMC. But first, I want to explain why. Because there are some that are going to tell you, pick CeeDee Lamb. Go with the safe receiver. He gives you a great floor. But is there not the possibility that CeeDee Lamb, if he plays every game this year, is not even the best receiver in fantasy? There's actually a very strong chance that he's not the wide receiver one at the end of the year. The likeliness that Christian McCaffrey is not RB1 if he plays every game or close to every game is very low, given his track record of catching the football, scoring touchdowns, being in the best offense in the league, with the best play caller in the league, being an MVP conversation. There's just nobody like McCaffrey. You can project that for Bijan Robinson. You can project that for Breece Hall. But the point blank period point is that CMC is in a great situation and he is an all-time talented football player. There's just nobody like him. He's one of one. And if he gets hurt, he gets hurt. But what you're trying to do is you're trying to win your league with the first pick. Who cares if you finish 4th or 8th? You want to win your league, and I think you do that by selecting the best player in fantasy, Christian McCaffrey. So now that we have our Hero RB, our single RB that's going to carry our running back position and our running back production, we will now look to build the rest of our team up. We'll look to build our wide receiving core. We'll look to build not just our receiving core, which a lot of people get mistaken, but also our tight end position, our quarterback position as best we can. We're going to take the best value at other positions. The more points you get per reception in league. So this is a 12-team PPR league, right? I have 2 running backs to start, 3 receivers with a flex, a tight end, and a quarterback. That's the standard league for what I play in. And in a full PPR setting, you want to try to leverage as many receivers, as many players that catch the football as possible, right? So having a guy like McCaffrey who can carry your running back production is ideal, given how flimsy and volatile the position of running back is. You don't want to be drafting 2 running backs at the top of your draft when you already put the most capital in the entire draft in your running back position. So that's the whole point of this strategy, is trying to build the rest of your team around this absolute stud that's going to carry your running back position. Okay, so with the second round pick, the board fell so that the top players on the board on Sleeper are Sam Laporta, Travis Kelce, Brandon Ayuk, Josh Jacobs, Isaiah Pacheco, so multiple running backs. But we also have some receivers on the board. So our decision here would be Sam Laporta, Travis Kelce. I personally think they're going too high on Sleeper. I'm not exactly sure why they're going so high on Sleeper. I wouldn't pick them in the 2nd round. 3rd round, 4th round, yeah, I'd be down for that. But 2nd round, no sir. So I'm going to have to look at other players here. I like Nico Collins. I like both Niners receivers. Mike Evans is very consistent. Jalen Waddle I like a lot. But the guy that I would pick at this spot is Nico Collins. Nico Collins is the wide receiver 1 for an offense that led the NFL in passing yards per game last year, and he is the alpha target in his prime for CJ Stroud. So I would take Nico Collins here. With the second pick, you're trying to look to balance your receiving core in some ways, and I think this is an underrated tip for you guys out there playing fantasy. When you're building a PPR team specifically and a wide receiving core, you're trying to build out a team that has explosiveness, a team that has consistency, a team that has floor, a team that has ceiling. Nico Collins is more of a ceiling play because he is going to provide 30-point weeks, 25, 35-point weeks, because he's going to have weeks where he scores 2 touchdowns. He's going to have weeks where he does catch 8 passes for 150 yards. But he's also going to have weeks where he's probably catching, more like 4 catches for like 85 yards and maybe a score, right? But there's going to be weeks where Diggs or Tank Dell catch more passes. So you want somebody maybe a little bit to complement Nico Collins here at the 2-3 turn. A guy that maybe gets more volume or is the number 1 in his offense or can contribute in a variety of ways. So you're looking at guys like Mike Evans. In half PPR, I think Mike Evans would be the pick for sure because of the touchdown upside. Brandon Ayuk, with the uncertainty of the Niner situation, although I do think he'll be a Niner, you might fade him here. Jalen Waddle, I think, is a very good pick. Debo was a must-draft wide receiver for me. And Cooper Kupp's also a guy with volume in his offense that I think is definitely worth the pick as well. So it's kind of pick and choose your poison here. I mean, there's so many different guys you could go with. The tight ends are still on the board. But I'm ultimately going to go with Jalen Waddle. And the reason I'm going to go with Jalen Waddle here is I think his situation is low-key a lot like the Rams, where the Rams have, 2 really good receivers. But the thing is, like, Jalen Waddle versus Cooper Kupp. Jalen Waddle's younger. Jalen Waddle's been ascending each and every season of his career. Cooper Kupp's getting older. Cooper Kupp's declining with each and every season. And there is the possibility that if Tyreek does go down, Jalen Waddle's ceiling ends up going through the roof in an offense that funnels targets to those 2 players. So I really like the ability to have 100 catch upside with Jalen Waddle and, probably like 85 catches for like 1,400 yards with Nico Collins and 10 touchdown upside. So I like those 2 players in their prime in those offenses. You could easily went with your personal choice of Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, Cooper Kupp, whoever you want, Mike Evans. All of them are viable. It's just how I felt in the moment to go with Jalen Waddle, right? But they're all very close. So then after that, we've got to look at the board first. So you got Mark Andrews and Dalton Kincaid as elite tight end options right here. Devontae Smith, Kenneth Walker, Zay Flowers, Tank Dell, Kyle Pitts, George Kittle. These tight ends are going very, very high in this draft. I don't think this is not tight end premium. So yeah, this is not tight end premium. So this is crazy how high Sleeper has these tight ends compared to some other platforms. But so I think the obvious pick right here, the guy that kind of fell down the board, is Devontae Smith. I think it's without question he's the best player on the board. There's not really a question about that. I mean, Kenneth Walker would be a bit of a reach in my opinion. I like Kenneth Walker a lot. So I think the plan here would be to fill out the rest of your roster here. We're going to continue to hit receiver. We're going to hit Devontae Smith. We get the pick right after this. And we're going to pick an elite tight end to kind of give us that advantage. So we're going to go Devontae Smith with this pick to give us 3 receivers, Nico Collins, Jalen Waddle, Devontae Smith. And Smith gives us, definitely some receptions week to week, but he's also a vertical downfield threat. I could actually see him having the best season of his career in a Kellen Moore offense. I wouldn't be shocked if he played a little bit more in the slot and things like that, but you got Smith, Waddle, Collins, which is one of the best, wide receiving cores already in this league. Plus, you already have the best running back in this league. And that's the whole point of this strategy. How many areas of your team can you make elite on your team, right? So we didn't get really, I would say, an elite quarterback. So the only area of this team that won't be elite is the quarterback position. But now turning around this pick, we can easily land an elite tight end. Rather, our choice of Mark Andrews or Dalton Kincaid. You could also go with somebody like Zay Flowers and just continue to hit wide receiver. But my feeling is with how high these tight ends are on this board, which is also a point, like depending on what platform you're on, if you're on Sleeper, just know that tight ends go a little bit higher. These elite tight ends go a little bit higher than on other platforms. So you do have to kind of play into that a little bit if you want to land the ideal team, right? So you have to understand that other people are going to be playing off of these rankings and you have to utilize that to your advantage, but you also have to play that into, how you're going to go about things. So Let's pick Dalton Kincaid here. I prefer Dalton Kincaid over Mark Andrews, and the reason for that, I think he has higher reception upside. He's younger. He's in year 2 of his career. Less injury risk. Mark Andrews is already injured, so there's something to kind of fade there. I don't really love Mark Andrews this year. I kind of do see him as a bust. I see Dalton Kincaid as a must-draft tight end this year because I think he'll lead Josh Allen's offense in catches, and that's a pretty big asset. So we have an elite tight end along with a 3 wide receiver package that's pretty dangerous, and we've got Christian McCaffrey on our team. It's looking real good so far with how we're building out this roster. And you guys can go and just draft from, number 1 and see what different combinations you can land. Maybe if you went with McCaffrey and then Kelsey and Waddle or Collins, right? You could have went McCaffrey, Laporta, and Collins. McCaffrey, Mike Evans, and Deebo Samuel, right? You could have went with a lot of different combinations, and then maybe you would have picked Zay Flowers there instead of Dalton Kincaid if you had Travis Kelce a little bit earlier, and instead of, Jalen Waddle or Nico Collins, you would have had Zay Flowers. So there's a lot of different combinations you could go with, just pointing that out, right? Right now, we have a team where, again, we have elite running back, we have elite tight end, in my opinion, we have 3 awesome receivers. So let's check the quarterback position. Let's see if we can land, a really nice quarterback for our team. And honestly, I don't mind picking Kyler Murray right here to secure a guy that has elite upside for fantasy purposes. So I think the plan here will be to be picking a receiver and then picking a receiver, or we have to check running back just to be respectful here. We could go with Najee Harris. Potentially, I don't think that would be a terrible pick to give us some volume at the running back position as our RB2. But I think we can get some values later on. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to continue to strengthen our wide receiving core. We've got guys that I really like Calvin Ridley and Chris Godwin. Both of them I think are very viable picks. I would lean them over Jaden Reed or Xavier Worthy, who are maybe sexier names, but I like the certainty of those 2 players a little bit more. And then at quarterback, we could potentially land Kyler, which would give us a pretty complete roster. So let's go with, I'm a big Calvin Ridley guy this year, and I lean him over Chris Godwin. I just think he has more potency, more high upside to his weekly ceiling. So he's our wide receiver 4, which means we're not really relying on him as much to create receptions. Right, we have Jalen Waddle, we have Nico Collins, we have Devontae Smith. These guys are all going to catch like 80 to 90 to 100 passes, right? Like it's not like, plus we have McCaffrey and Dalton Kincaid. Kincaid was drafted over Andrews because of the receptions, right? And not exactly the touchdowns, which is where maybe Mark Andrews would give us. So we're trying to complete, our roster with a complete vision. And Calvin Ridley gives us more highly upside, with Will Levis being a high A-dot quarterback that's throwing the ball down the field. We've already heard that Calvin Ridley is going to be moved around like Jamar Chase in this offense. Their coach obviously being the former Bengal offensive coordinator. So Ridley is the wide receiver 1 on his team. And that kind of goes under the radar with where he's being picked. I think he's a definite value on Sleeper. So I think Calvin Ridley as the wide receiver 1 is a wide receiver 4 on our team is pretty dangerous and pretty nice. I wouldn't have hated Chris Godwin. I wouldn't have hated Jaden Reed, to be honest. I think those would have been good picks, but I just like Calvin Ridley this year. And then, like I said, I'm going to pick Kyler Murray because I think Kyler Murray, out of all the quarterbacks remaining, he is the last guy remaining, in my opinion, that has top 3 ceiling outcome. Like, I could see Brock Purdy or Jordan Love finishing in the top 5, but I think Kyler Murray could easily finish as QB2, and we wouldn't really be that shocked because of his rushing upside, because of how good the offense is, because of how bad their defense is. He has a lot of chance to score fantasy points this year. So I'm going with Kyler Murray. It would have been very nice. I've done these mocks before where we've been able to land both Trey McBride and Kyler Murray to have a bit of a stack there, but it doesn't always work out that way. So we were actually 1 pick away from having Trey McBride on our team. Usually Devontae Smith goes ahead, but we did get a value in Devontae Smith there. So we end up getting Kyler and Kincaid, 2 guys that I think are not exactly viewed as elite options at their position, but I definitely feel like they'll finish in the top 6 or 7 of their position without a doubt. So I really like how this team is shaping up so far. So now we're at the point where we have our entire roster full except for our RB2 spot. So we're thinking about our next wide receiver, maybe a guy with upside and potentially a guy that could change our fantasy season, or we're starting to take a look at the running back position, right? So we've got Jonathan Brooks, who definitely has upside. He's on the pup. We got Jaylen Warren, who a lot of people seem to like in fantasy football. I kind of like Najee a bit more, but Warren's definitely talented. You know, you still got RB1s like Brian Robinson out there. Tajay Spears is somebody people really like. I think he's very talented. You know, you've got some sleepers down the line like Rico Dowdle and Chase Brown, who I think will be RB1s in their offenses. So you could go all the way in here by selecting a wide receiver and, you know, two receivers if you really want. Like, you could go Christian Watson and Brian Thomas and just swing for the absolute fences at wide receiver and just land like 6 deadly receivers. But what I'm going to do here, to be a little bit more conservative in our approach, I'm going to land one receiver with upside and then a running back to kind of give us an RB2 with a floor. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go Christian Watson. That's my guy. I think Watson has a chance. You could easily go Brian Thomas. They have similar archetypes. I would go with Christian Watson here. And the reason for that is I think he's in year 3. He's fixed his hamstrings. I'm convinced he's about to become the wide receiver one of the Green Bay Packers. He has all the talent in the world. He showcased high touchdown upside. So let's just say Ridley gets hurt or Waddle goes down or, you know, one of these guys for whatever reason bust. Like, let's say Will Levis is just absolutely terrible to the point where Calvin Ridley's unstartable. Well, then maybe Christian Watson breaks out. That still gives us a 5th receiver that we can plug in on a weekly basis, and he's basically a wide receiver 3 or a wide receiver 2, right? So that's the whole point of picking another receiver. Just because he's on your bench, you never know what's going to happen. You could use it as trade leverage, right? You just want to continue to hammer the wide receiver position so that you have options at flex. That's a big deal, especially in PPR, where you want to get that advantage, right? So then we look at the running back position. We've got Brooks and Warren, who I would be convinced about, Spears, right? Robinson. If you wanted an absolute floor here, I'd say Robinson would be a solid pick. Warren is a good PPR pick in my opinion. Brooks might have the most upside because he's a rookie and he could be the RB1 in his offense. I could buy into Spears. I'm not into Singletary. I'm not into Gus at this pick, Elliott at this pick. Honestly, I would consider Chase Brown at this pick. I'd consider, you know, those guys at this pick. So I think Jaylen Warren would be the pick. I think he gives us, you know, a pretty solid PPR floor considering his reception ability. Then he's also a very explosive running back who could easily lead his team in touches if, you know, Arthur Smith decides to go the route of Jaylen Warren over Najee Harris. But there's definitely going to be a split there. But we do know that Arthur Smith loves to throw the football and design targets to his running backs as well. So I think Jaylen Warren's still going to play a huge role in this offense. So now at this pick, we're not really looking at quarterback or tight end because we already spent enough capital in Kyler Murray and Dalton Kincaid to where we're confident in our quarterback and our tight end. So we're not really worrying about backups. Honestly, like, I don't believe in the bye week backup. I just pick them up off the waiver wire because you're going to be starting Dalton Kincaid and Kyler Murray pretty much every week of the season. If you want to pick a quarterback to give you another possible outcome at that position, you know, and another matchup on a weekly basis, like with the last pick in your draft or one of the last picks in your draft, that's perfectly fine, right? But we want to look at some of the weaknesses of our roster, which is only really running back. So we're going to have to shoot for an upside running back at this pick. And then we'll also probably look to land another receiver to give us potentially, you know, 5 receivers that can help us on our team. So let's just look at all the positions just to make sure. And at the running back position, I think the clear pick here is Chase Brown. Chase Brown to me is somebody that I think could lead his team in touches. I think he's going to be a reception monster. I think he's going to be a potentially explosive element of the Bengals offense. They're trying to give him this job over Zach Moss. It's just a matter of Chase Brown taking it. I loved his explosiveness coming out of college. I thought he showed that briefly in year 1 as a rookie, and he could definitely finish as an RB2 this year. So Chase Brown is a very good sleeper pick this season. So looking at the wide receiver position, we've got, you know, 2 Bills receivers that are pretty interesting, and Curtis Samuel and Khalil Shakir. We could take our shot on one of those guys. We've got a rookie in Mitchell from the Colts. We've got a rookie with Leggett. Josh Palmer is a guy that I really like, but he's more of a floor play in my opinion. So it's kind of interesting. Like, I don't really see anybody that's like an amazing value here. Like, nobody really screams at me in terms of the wide receiver position. So, like, the route you could also go here is Jerome Ford in our current build, because Jerome Ford is a running back that's going to be the starter for Cleveland early in the year when Nick Chubb is coming back. So you could easily go there. But you could also go with my must-draft running back, Rico Dowdle, who has the upside to start over Zeke in Dallas. And I think it's likely that's going to happen. So I'm actually just going to reach on this board and pick Rico Dowdle and give us another dart throw at running back with a lot of upside. If he ends up being the starting running back in Dallas, you can never draft this too early. So to me, like, I think he has enough talent to make this worth it. I'm going to pick Rico Dowdle and just look to get our wide receiver 5 in this next round. So what we have is 2 picks left, and then I'll pick a defense and a kicker and go over that. So because last mock draft, I went over why you don't pick a defense and a kicker, you know, at this stage in the offseason. If you're a little bit closer, like when I draft September 4th, I draft September 5th. So basically, you know, or September 3rd or whatever. So those drafts are like right in front of the fantasy season, which there's no point of drafting extra players for your team. But again, this whole thing, again, Josh Palmer's still there, so we're just going to pick Josh Palmer. He could be the wide receiver 1 for the Chargers. That's a pretty simple pick for me. And then you could look at tight end in case you like any sleepers, but all these guys are pretty much taken. Quarterback, you could look, you know, maybe you go with Stafford, a guy that I really like. If you're not confident about Kyler Murray, you could go with Stafford there. I wouldn't hate that pick. But again, I just continue to hammer running back at this point and see if we can get an upside option. And the one that's kind of screaming at me is J.K. Dobbins. Dobbins could be in a split with Gus Edwards with the Chargers. We know that they're going to run the ball a lot with their offensive coordinator that they have that comes over from Baltimore. And it's very likely that Dobbins is at least splitting with Edwards, if not that he's the starter. Like, it wouldn't be shocking that Dobbins is the starter, right? He is pretty talented. He is coming off major injuries, but he is pretty talented and was once upon a time viewed as the franchise running back of the Ravens. So we're going to go with J.K. Dobbins here and give us some upside at the running back position once again. So our team's looking very, very solid in my opinion. We've got 5 receivers, you know, three really good receivers. Watson gives us, or Ridley is our 4th receiver, which is awesome. Watson gives us a ton of upside at 5th receiver, and then Palmer is our 6th receiver, which gives us kind of a little bit of a balance with the floor that he kind of brings to us. And then we still have, despite only picking a running back first and then waiting all the way until round 9, we have 5 running backs on our team. So that's the way you want to do this, is you want to put the capital of wide receiver, tight end, quarterback up top when you pick McCaffrey first, and then you want to add that value and just look for, you know, quantity of running backs to try to just hit on 1 or 2 of them, right? So we've knocked 4 out of there in the last 5 picks. So at this point, I mean, we're just drafting kickers and defenses, just looking at the board at players that I wouldn't mind drafting in fantasy this year. I think that Geno Smith is a sleeper and Will Levis is a sleeper. In 2 QB leagues, I think they're very interesting. Levis gives you, I think, more upside, but Smith, I think, gives you a sneaky, solid floor in 2 QB leagues specifically. I wouldn't be looking at them in 1 quarterback leagues. The running backs that are still on the board, you got McLaughlin, who's a pretty interesting change of pace for Javonte Williams, Antonio Gibson, who's the pure number 2 for Ramondre Stevenson, Tyrone Tracy, a guy that I've pointed out in a must-draft video before at running back, has got a lot of upside. Ray Davis has been looking good as the backup to James Cook in Buffalo, right? So just going over some guys. Khalil Herbert has looked real good in the preseason as well, to a backup to DeAndre Swift. Wouldn't be surprised if he ended up getting a ton of carries people didn't expect. Jalen Polk has a lot of upside as a rookie receiver for the Patriots. You know, there's still guys here. Ricky Pearsall, depending on what happens with Brandon Ayuk. Demario Douglas, the guy that I really like out of New England. So just getting our kicker. Let's pick... I like Daniel Carlson as a player, so let's just pick Daniel Carlson. The Raiders like to kick field goals, but, you know... It really doesn't matter that much. You usually want to just play your kicker, see how it goes at the beginning of the year. You usually want to have them rather tied to a lot of attempts, a lot of consistency, or you want to have them tied to a great offense. But you can kind of play the matchup game with kicker. Typically, that's what I'll do. If I don't land like a Harrison Butker type of player, then I'll probably just look to land, a matchup type of kicker where I'm just waiver wiring it every week, and I'm looking at which teams give up the most points to kickers, and I'm just swapping them out week in and week out. So that's usually how I play kicker. And then defense, there's a lot of quality defenses still on the board. I really love the really love the Browns, I should say. The Steelers, those would be my top two. The Ravens and Cowboys are pretty good in fantasy. The Chiefs are still there. The Texans have upside. The Bills are always solid. The Patriots are solid. The Lions. But I would go with Cleveland here, probably. I mean, Dallas plays Cleveland. Cleveland plays Dallas. Baltimore plays Kansas City, so I'd try to avoid them. Pittsburgh plays Atlanta, I think, in week 1. So I think Cleveland. I just think Cleveland was the best defense in the league last year. They were a game changer for a lot of people. The Dallas is really good with their interceptions and stuff like that, but that should probably regress slightly. I just think Cleveland will be the most consistent, so I'm going to pick them. But that is our team, guys. So our team ends up being right here. At quarterback, Kyler Murray. Running back, Christian McCaffrey. Running back, Jalen Warren. Wide receiver, Nico Collins. Wide receiver, Jalen Waddle. Wide receiver, Devontae Smith. Dalton Kincaid at tight end. Flex is Calvin Ridley. Daniel Carlson, Cleveland Browns. Then we got Christian Watson coming off the bench. Chase Brown and Rico Dowdle as high upside running backs. Josh Palmer as our floor receiver to end it off at our receiving core. And J.K. Dobbins to give us an RB2 that could be an RB1. And that's exactly how you want to draft a hero RB build. You want to start off the draft with your Christian McCaffrey, with your Bijan Robinson, with your Breece Hall. Then from there, and I think those are the only 3 running backs that you can really pull this off with, to me, this year. So if you guys want me to draft from like pick 4 with Bijan or pick 7 with Breece, we can definitely do that. Whatever pick, we could just run it in terms of hero RB and run it with Bijan and Breece and run it from different locations on the draft board. But what you want to do is you want to take your hero RB to start in McCaffrey. You want to hammer the other positions, wide receiver, tight end, quarterback. You want to get strong at quarterback and tight end. Don't forget quarterback and tight end, right? Don't just neglect it. It's harder at pick 1 because by the time you have pick 1, as we saw, like Mahomes, Allen, Hurts, and Jackson, just where they fall on the board, they're already gone. So we didn't really have a chance to pick Mahomes or Allen or pick, Lamar or Hurts. Like, it would have been maybe a little bit of a reach for Lamar and Hurts based on the 2nd and 3rd round, right? So we didn't really want to go there. But, you want to hammer wide receiver, get real strong, in my opinion, at wide receiver specifically. Look to deviate, look to get to your tight end, look to get to your quarterback throughout the first 7 to 8 rounds, right? Preferably one of those top 6 quarterbacks, preferably one of those top 6 tight ends. And then later in the draft, once you've gotten your 4th receiver on board, you can start to look at running backs, see who you like in that range of the 8th, 7th round at, would probably be the area where you start to look at it. 7th round, okay, who's there? 8th round, okay, who's there? And then 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, we're trying to just stockpile running backs with upside, running backs with upside, running backs with upside. So Jalen Warren, talented running back in a dual backfield. Chase Brown, who could be the starter, talented young running back. Rico Dowdle with Zeke in front of him, basically. He could just surpass him right as week 1 begins, right? J.K. Dobbins, who could surpass Gus Edwards in his backfield. So just going for guys that could fill out your RB2 spot and give you some upside at that position. All right, so that's how you do it this year in fantasy to build a hero RB team with CMC at the top. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed, Gronk spike the like button. Don't forget to subscribe. It's Mitch. Peace, guys.